Meet Megan. It's 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, and Megan sits at her dining room table with her laptop open, staring blankly at a half-written email. Her two kids are in the living room, arguing over what movie to watch, but she barely notices. Her thoughts are consumed by the tension from today's executive team meeting. As the COO of a fast-growing tech company, Megan has always prided herself on her ability to lead. But lately, something feels off. Her team, once high-performing, is missing deadlines and producing subpar results. The frustration boiled over in today's meeting when two of her senior leaders clashed over a key initiative. Megan tried to step in, but the tension only grew, and now she's questioning, why can't I get them on the same page? For months, Megan has been working longer hours, hoping that if she just pushes harder, that things will improve. But the harder she works, the more resistance she feels. And she's beginning to notice the toll it's taking, not just on her team, but on herself. Just last night, her husband commented, "You're here, but you're not really here." And she knows he's right. Even when she's home, she's stuck in a loop of frustration, replaying conversations and wondering where things went wrong. Deep down, Megan wonders if she's the problem. Is she missing something in her leadership? Are her blind spots affecting the team's dynamic? She feels stuck, overwhelmed, and unsure of how to break the cycle. Today, I'll be talking with Susan Drum, CEO advisor, leadership coach, and best-selling author of The Leader's Playlist. Unleash the power of music and neuroscience to transform your leadership and your life. Susan helps leaders like Megan build trust quickly, to navigate conflicts, and to disrupt unhealthy patterns that are affecting their teams. Her expertise is in helping leaders identify their strengths and their blind spots, and also to identify the questions they need to ask to drive meaningful change. And I'm excited to hear how Susan would advise Megan on how to recognize and disrupt unhealthy patterns that are holding her back, to then build stronger connections with her team while regaining balance in her life. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Susan, take me back years ago. You graduated law school, you started doing consulting, and you didn't like it. And I can relate to that because the work I do now is not exactly the education that I had.
Yeah.
But I guess what made you realize that you need to do something different, that wasn't for you?
Well, I think one of the things I realize is, looking back, I'm doing exactly what I suggest people do now, which is recognize that I might be stuck in a pattern and disrupt it as soon as possible because it's not going to serve me. I enjoyed law school and obviously going to such an amazing law school and coming out with so much law debt that people thought I was crazy that I wasn't going to then pursue the law. And I took the bar in New York just in case I wanted to go back into law, but I knew it wasn't for me. And I could tell by working in my summers at various law firms that it was going to be soul sucking for me. And so it was out of that experience that I decided I wanted to get back into business and get into consulting. But even then in consulting, I did that for a while. And yes, there were some better parts to it, but then some industries I just wasn't passionate about. Like we did a strategy at BCG with hydroelectric turbines. And I just didn't care. But I was going through the motions and I was trying to be like, this is so fascinating, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
Um, and but it's even with these first two experiences, like law teaches you how to make finer and finer distinctions related to case law. So when you write your briefs, you're writing which of these cases should apply, which should not apply. And that same skill I apply now in leadership development to making finer distinctions in mindset and how people think. So I
Mm.
was able to leverage that gift of that education in this way. And then obviously in consulting and strategy consulting, the leadership development work that we do is always in service of the mission and strategy. So really having that background serves the work that we do now. And from there, I went to NBC television, and I came in Six Sigma because GE used to own NBC. And Six Sigma is really a process, if you know anything about it, using statistical analysis to find variation in processes. Now, if you know anything about me, that is not my forte or passion at all. But here I am thinking, well, if I go to an entertainment company, maybe that will be give me some excitement or into or help me find what is my calling, what is like maybe something in this space called to me. But
Mm.
no, that still wasn't it. And at some point now, I'm 5 years out of law school and I feel lost. And I feel like, what was this all for? I've got this amazing education. I'm a hard worker. But I am burnt out at 30. This is pathetic, right? And so that's when I decided just to take a break and do something that didn't make any sense at the time. And I got a master's in acting from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art.
Wow.
And people thought I was crazy again, right? But man, what a difference that made in the trajectory of my career because I learned so much through that process of dealing with that inner critic, that voice inside your head, and connecting authentically and understanding people and building empathy in a way that I thought there's got to be a way I could bring this back to business. Now, this was back in the early 2000s before people really knew that there was something called leadership development as a profession. And but I researched it and I found leadership development and I started to work for a boutique firm for a number of years. And then I went out on my own in 2006 and been doing it ever since. So it took
Wow.
me a while to get there, but now I have the consistency of doing it more than 20 years. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Very
since
cool.
2003. Yeah.
Yeah, two things that I hope everybody gets from that story. The first one is it doesn't matter what your education is, how what age you are, what industry, if you are committed to making a change, you can do it and you can find success. You just
Yeah.
that's your story, right? It was how often it's like, oh well, this was my education, this was my degree, and I'm just gonna have to stick with it for the rest of my life. You said,
Oh,
no,
yes.
that's not for me.
Yes, exactly. And that's where it's like, that's just a pattern and you can disrupt it and you can recognize that that's just a pattern and that there's a way. So there's always freedom in any given turn. And I think helping people see where they have freedom is really what I'm passionate about. And
Yeah.
to show them you're not as stuck as you think you are. I mean, my mom is a wonderful. We were just talking about my mom who just turned 90. She's amazing. Do you know that she got her college degree at 60?
Wow.
At 60, right? We were there for her graduation. And not only did she get her college degree, but she was at the University of Pittsburgh and she got it with, she was president of the honor society and the student newspaper and all the kind of stuff you would do when you were younger. There's my 60-year-old mother in there doing it. So yeah,
Wow,
definitely
that's
too.
powerful. That's powerful. It's the limiting belief as well as you said the pattern. And I really appreciate that you use that word often. I do too. In the work that I do with my clients and some of the speaking I do is I talk about patterns. And it seems like this is something you learned about yourself when you were
Yeah.
like that you had this ability to recognize patterns. I guess talk me through that discovery of
Yeah.
being able to recognize patterns.
Yes. I didn't even realize, to some degree, I'm realizing it more and more as I look back on my life and reflect on things. But I think where one of the instances it first showed up was how I got into law school and I took the LSAT to get in. And the way I practiced for that is I just took eight practice exams and I started noticing the patterns of the types of questions that they would ask. And I took the exam and I only got two wrong. So I was in the 98th percentile and it helped me get into this amazing Harvard law as a result of that. But it was that ability to sort of anticipate and see the patterns in the types of questions that were being asked or what they were after that allowed me to understand and crack the code.
Yeah. So now you, of course, help leaders to be able to identify their patterns. And so you have to do that for them, but then you're teaching them how to do it for themselves.
Exactly. And to notice them in their team, right? To notice them
Hmm.
in their employees. What patterns are they stuck in and how can they bring that pattern to consciousness and then help them shift and get on a whole new pattern. And it's what I really believe is this is the essential skill going forward because we are living in a time of escalating complexity and change. Meaning change is happening at a faster and faster rate than ever before. And so if we are not able to recognize the patterns that hold us back and shift them, we're going to get snowed under
Yeah.
because the environment is changing too quickly. So we need to learn and adapt and change more quickly. And in order to do that, we've got to see what the options are and where we're kind of stuck in ruts.
Yeah. And there's a part of this where we can diagnose the problem of what keeps us in a pattern. And you talk about it quite a bit. You refer to it as the childhood upbringing, the childhood trauma, those kind of things that are keeping us in an outdated pattern or an unhealthy
Yeah.
pattern. So, can you talk about that connection to childhood trauma or emotions
Yeah.
and how it affects us as adults and as leaders?
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm talking about some of the deepest core patterns that can get in your way, right? We've got maybe more recent patterns that we've developed, but if I really want to make some change, I want to look at what's that recurring thread through your life
Mm,
that keeps showing up. And it got established in response to trauma or change as a child that you had to deal with. And there were some statements that you made about the world or beliefs that got embedded in you. And because that belief is also a belief about yourself, one of the things we're looking for is what is that core belief about yourself? And as you hold that belief, that what I would call like a vibration, that's what
yeah.
shows up to you in your world and in your life that keeps reinforcing it.
Yeah.
And so helping people understand that a lot of the deepest seated patterns of what is affecting your leadership competence and effectiveness today does have its roots in your childhood.
Yeah. What are some of the beliefs you find that these executives hold? And I ask this because in a way
Yeah.
I'm hoping to normalize it for people because you
Oh,
work
yeah.
with executives, with people who are in the positions that so many aspire to.
Yeah.
Yet I'm sure there are some beliefs there that you uncover with them. What are some of those beliefs that they hold?
Well, the in the book, I outline in the leaders playlist, 9 examples of leaders, their old playlists and their new playlists, their old beliefs and their new beliefs. And some of the examples are things like, um, I'm only loved if I succeed. That's a
Mm,
belief, right? My worth is dependent on my level of success, or I'm not safe, or I'm treated unfairly, or I'm not good enough, right?
yeah.
The imposter syndrome.
Now, in your book, The Leaders Playlist, you discuss how music can help to be able to work through some of those patterns and create new patterns. And there's a connection between music and neuroscience. And I'm very curious to hear how that all works, what you discovered in the connection between music and neuroscience.
Yes. So music is such a powerful modality. Music lights up all four regions of the brain. And if you know anything about some of the Alzheimer's patient research, they found that Alzheimer's patients who are unresponsive, when they put on their favorite music, they come alive and there's an increased happiness, eye contact, laughing, talking. And this can be seen on an MRI where all parts of the brain are lighting up.
Wow.
And so this ability, and it can last, by the way, more than 20 minutes after the music stops. So what the research on music's impact on the brain is showing is that it allows enhanced communication between these different areas of the brain. And the way I teach to people is that it's essentially like a fertilizer. It's allowing new neural networks to form more quickly than without it, because it's
Mm.
also tapping into our emotional state and emotional vibration. And so when you pair that, when you want to make a change, anything you add music to is going to make it more efficient and is going to make that change happen more quickly. And so
Wow.
we know music. Think about this. We know music can change our state, which is why we work out to music.
Yeah.
But in the book and in the work that I do now, it's truly looking at, we can take this deeper. There is a way to leverage music to solve real problems and shift deep-seated patterns that are haunting us, that we know we need to get out of, or even being a pattern interruption to recognize when we're in a pattern that isn't serving us.
Wow. I was just watching that show, Penguin. Have you seen that show on HBO
Really?
on Max? Okay,
Wow.
so it's like kind of like The Sopranos, but it's like Batman related. Why am I bringing it up? It's because the mother in the show has dementia, and every time he puts music on for her, it's like she lights up, and she
Yes.
gets up and she starts dancing and she starts just feeling different. And before that, she was really struggling mentally. I
Yeah.
just think it's fascinating, and I also can go to my own life experiences and not even realize that I've done this in
Mhm.
changing my own state. Like before needing to go into a really important meeting, before talking on a stage, right? There's a specific song that I play that I have an association to, and so is that really
What
what
is
it's
it?
about? It's a song by Kid Cudi. It's called Immortal,
Mm.
and it's just for me a very powerful message about stepping into your power. And I've had it going from when I was a sales manager years ago at Tesla all the way till now as the song that just something clicks for me. So is that
Yeah.
what it is? An association gets created between, let's say, a mindset or a belief and the song that you play?
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So, um, one, it can be used as association of like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing that thing again, and there's that song that reminds me of it. But also part of it is getting really clear what's the shift that you need to make in that belief. Let's say if I'm treated unfairly to I am empowered, what's the music that has you practice that emotional vibration of I'm empowered, that has you feel that you can actually tap into? And the more you can practice that level of vibration using the music in that way, the more able you'll be able to maintain that or access it when you need it. So
Wow.
it's like learning any kind of skill. It's the more
Yeah.
it's with repetition. Now, what's interesting is I think the brain also likes, it needs repetition to learn something, but it also gets bored of the same things. Like think about a song that you really loved at one point. Now you're like, God, I hear that song one more time. I'm gonna, you know, or sometimes I'm like, God, this channel ruined it for me because they're playing that song all the time. Um,
Yeah.
so you need to continuously update the playlist and notice, are you experiencing some of the same emotions or vibrational frequency that you're looking to create? Because if the songs isn't
Mm,
doing it for you anymore, you need to update them and
yeah.
and to continue to practice that way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm
Yeah.
sure if you stop listening to one of those favorite songs for a long time, you can go back to it and it can be
Yeah.
reinvigorating, right? Because you gave it a nice long break. So I know
Yes.
music is a major tool that you
Hmm.
really believe in, and for great reasons here. And then the other tool that I know you use quite a bit is Enneagram. And I
Hmm.
recently heard you talk about how companies use personality tests like DISC and Myers-Briggs, and they use it. And then you talk about in this video, you're talking to one of your clients about how, well, what did you get from that? What actions did you take? And the
Hmm.
person was like, well, I just know about people's personality. So can you talk a little bit about, okay, what are we supposed to take from these kind of tests,
Yeah.
and why Enneagram specifically? Why is that one that you really are a big advocate for?
Yes. I am such a big advocate because it is truly a model for growth. It's not just saying, okay, you're this. It's, and what do I do with that? It answers the so what question, like, so what? So you're, an ISTP or a high D. So what does that mean? If I'm in the field of leadership development, I want to know what's the path of growth for this specific individual. And that's what the Enneagram maps out for you, tells you very clearly. And not only does it tell you what that is, it tells you who can best benefit you on that path of growth. So, in other words, it's a systems model. It's showing the interconnectivity that we all have between each other. So, some of my best teachers are those who are looking in the exact opposite direction of me. And I can see that in the map of the Enneagram. A lot of times I
Mm,
use this analogy that we think as human beings that we can see 360 degrees like a chameleon, but we can't. We have a central vision and a peripheral vision. And wherever we point our focus of attention, that's what we see.
yeah.
But there's something behind our head we can't see. That's our blind spot. Well, in this model, someone else is looking in that direction.
Mm,
So you start to understand what my pattern of focus of attention tends to go to, and that becomes my superpower. I'm really good at looking at that. But I also start to notice that there's things that I'm not seeing and someone else is. So, what is it I can learn from them? Because it really turns conflict on its head, right? Because if I'm arguing it's blue, and you're saying, no, it's yellow, you can
yeah.
start to see why that is. And
Yeah.
we start to see how much communication and mistrust happens because we interpret others' behaviors through our own type filter. And we start to see how to connect to people in a much deeper way. And as leaders, work with them based on their own motivation. Not everybody is motivated by the same things you are. So, do you
Yeah.
know what your team is truly motivated by, individuals on your team? And how can you work with that to the benefit of the collective? So that's what I love about it. It's like a model, it's a systems model that becomes the collective, not just about the individual.
That's excellent. The analogy that you have there, I love. I often use a similar analogy, and when you were saying, you saw me laughing when you said I see it as blue, I see it as yellow. I often refer to the lenses that we wear, and that you
Yeah.
know I look at the sky and I say, oh, the sky is yellow, and someone else says, well, the sky is red, and I'm like, no, it's yellow, and they're saying it's red, but in reality, we're both wearing tinted glasses, so we're both wrong, right?
Yeah.
Or it's just
Yeah.
we're seeing it differently. Maybe we're not both wrong. That's not the accurate wording. We're just seeing it differently,
Hmm.
and what you're suggesting here as leaders, what we need to do is be able to recognize the color lens that we are wearing,
Yeah.
and then be able to know that others are seeing it from a different perspective. They have their own
Right.
colored lenses that they're wearing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely. And that the best decisions are going to be made, I often say, with a cognitively diverse team. This is really about cognitive diversity in my mind, in terms of perspective, not in terms of spectrum analysis, but more in terms of perspective. And the best teams are cognitively diverse teams. They have the representation of these various leadership styles. But that same team, if you don't understand how to work with that, can also have the most conflict. So if we can turn that conflict actually into connectedness, then the power of that team is unleashed.
Yeah. It reminds me of a training I went to years ago when I was early in my career. And at the time, I was hiring new employees from my team, and things weren't going really well. I wasn't really building a good team. And then one of the trainers, when I was talking with him, he said, "It sounds like you're trying to hire 12 U's, like 12 J's."
Yes.
And
Right.
yeah, and I was not conscious of that I was just interviewing people hoping they would be like me, and that
Mhm.
wasn't effective. And after
Right.
I left that training, I said, wow, I have to be able to recognize that that is a tendency of mine, that I get
Mhm.
attracted to people who are like me, and I need to have more diversity
Yeah.
within my team. Now, you mentioned their conflict, and I want to ask you about this because I'm sure you hear this all the time. Leaders who say, well, I need them to all understand. Like, my team,
Yeah.
they're the problem. They're not getting on the same page, right? And
Yeah.
in that story with Megan, that was one of the things that
Yeah.
she says. It's like, why are they not all on the same page? So when someone is talking about this with you, and
Mhm.
clearly they are looking to the external as that's the problem,
Mhm.
how do you work with them on that?
Well, the only power you have is internal. So
Yeah,
if you can't master your internal state of influence, you'll never master an out external state of influence.
right.
So part of that is looking at what are those what is that core belief driving your leadership, and then where are you lacking curiosity with your team? So, in the instance of like, what is their perspective? Where's the common ground? What questions have you asked about that with the team and with the individuals? And in what ways have you not illuminated the shared goal that you're all after? Right. And how they each contribute to that and how they need each other in order to do that.
Yeah,
That's one of the pieces, but also the Enneagram will really illuminate exactly for the team. Oh, now I get why there's conflict between these two people, right?
yeah,
And the way we go about it is you start to see like my growth area when I do my work individually and I realize my growth area is actually someone else's superpower. Now I have a whole new appreciation for that. So part of it is like understanding for yourself, like what is that blind spot for yourself? And so I'd be curious for Megan, like what is like that's where she should get curious. What is her blind spot? And if I had to say, like, what's the playlist running her right now?
mhm,
Some of the things that came out in that story, I would surmise might be I'm only loved if I succeed, right? Because I've got sort of these workaholic tendencies,
yeah,
lack of caring connection. Like I don't even know what's happening in my family. I've completely like let them go. I'm not able to balance that the competing demands of work and family, which of course understand that there's a lot of competing demands, but um and just believing that if I just keep going at it and I keep working harder, somehow that's kind of like continuing the same pattern in the
yeah,
face of change and adversity. So her team has changed, and yet she's still going at it the same way. That is ripe for pattern destruction right there.
yeah,
Right.
right.
And so, and perhaps in the past, she learned if I work really hard, I get results. So now I'm just going to keep repeating that pattern. I just need to work harder. But at
Yeah,
some point now, she's experiencing the fact that time is not infinite. You have limited number of hours in the day. So continuing to work harder isn't going to do it. Something needs to shift in the way you're showing up with your team in order to see them shift, because that's how we're all interacting and influencing each other.
yeah. And we have a few things that we're pulling from this conversation, like Enneagram, being able to understand one's patterns and another's, and as well as how music can be incorporated. Are there any go-to practices, techniques that you really encourage? And I know everyone's unique, so it really depends on the
Yeah.
situation here, but let's say it's something that someone does at the start of their day or throughout the day as a means to avoid going down pattern A and begin going down pattern B.
Yeah, yeah. So the process there's a first step of the process is understanding what is that pattern or playlist running you.
Yeah.
And but let's say she gets that, right? So she's like, yeah, I believe my worth is tied up with my success. So I am my success. And what emotions does that bring up for her? As you listed them out, right? And the frustration. Um, what does she want to be feeling instead? And so let's guess, if I was asking her, she might say, I just want to feel a sense of ease, right? And a little bit like, why can't things just be a little bit easier? Why does everything have to be so hard? Right.
Yeah.
So if there's wanting a bit more ease, then I would ask her to think about what songs best represent ease to you in your life
Mm.
and come up with that. Maybe it's Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, right? To name a classic. Or what are some of those songs that can get you into a state of ease? And then put together a little playlist of 10 or more songs that have that and listen to that to start your day. Start your day in ease. What's that going to be required? Well, you're not going to be able to look at your email first thing. You're going to have to put the phone in the kitchen and start your day with ease. Put your headphones on, spend a little time in ease, get ready and a little bit. Practice that state before you're reacting to the external world. Because the more you practice that, the more you'll be able to practice it out in nature, on your hikes, on, walking your dog, whatever, when you're allowing your system to calm down. And then you can even use it when you're feeling really stressed out. Like, let me just put on a song or two and let me really connect to what is this feeling of ease. We have that ability. We can shift our state that way.
Yeah.
And if we can do it for an Alzheimer's patient that's completely unresponsive and then can start talking, you better believe it can help you shift from frustration to ease.
Mm. It's all about being intentional about what pattern you wish to create for yourself. It's as if you have these incredible, powerful tools around you. And what I find is that the reality is people just don't know they're there. They don't know that it's available. But I would
Yeah.
encourage everyone listening right now that you pick up this tool and you start using it. You apply it in your life. What we're talking about here doesn't require a huge time investment. It's not
Yeah.
something that you have to like make this big energy investment either. It's just something that you can do to start your day, to put yourself into that state. I love that. Now, I'm going to throw something at you left field because I read this about you and I have to ask you about it because I thought it was so awesome. As we're recording this, Thanksgiving just passed,
Yeah.
and you posted on Instagram that you did something very unique for your team. And I thought it was really cool. And
Oh,
I wanted to ask you to share what you did uh, for Thanksgiving for your team.
yeah. I just spent a little time creating a loom, which is just a video message that they each received the day before Thanksgiving, letting them know how much I value them and how impactful and important they are to team success, and how proud I am of what they've done to contribute to raising consciousness for leaders, that tying it back to the mission that we're all about, that it's not just like, you're doing this for me. We're doing this because we have a mission in the world and you're contributing, and reminding them how they're making that contribution. And in some cases, I brought up specific client impacts that were made and how this leader is feeling this way, and just helping them connect the dots between what they've been doing and the impact they're making.
Yeah.
Because we think as leaders, people can see it, but they can't always see it. So it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love what you did because it reminded me of something that I experienced on the receiving end of a leader who I worked with at Tesla years ago. His name is Michael, and he gave everybody this frame, and I still have it. It's right here. It's off camera, but it's a quote by Marianne Williamson. And the quote is, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's the one that says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us." And it stayed with me. Every move I've moved multiple times, it stayed with me. And he wrote a handwritten note to every leader about the unique contributions that they made. And it had such a profound impact on me. So I wanted you to share that because I think it's a wonderful example of great leadership and how it is in a responsibility of a leader to be able to connect people towards the greater mission, towards a purpose. Because what the research all shows, Susan, I know you know this, that when we are connected to something greater than ourselves, we are happier and we perform better.
Yes. Yeah.
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 I just thank you for sharing that. I thought it was very cool. All right. So I want
Thank
to I want to bring this. I always ask everyone to do this at the very end. It's kind of like putting you in this little scenario with the person in the story. And this is Megan, right? So let's say Megan is, she's feeling stuck. And let's say she listens to your incredible podcast, The Enlightened Executive. She hears some of the things that you share and she says, you know what, I want to reach out to this person. And she gets on a call with you and she tells you her story and you have advice that you can share with her. What would be the
you.
first piece of advice? What would be the thing that you would tell her right away to be able to work through her issues and her challenges?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be telling her anything right away. I'd be asking a lot of questions. So, and some of it in those questions, she'd start to see some things for herself. One of those would be, what's the legacy she wants to leave? Like, what truly matters to her? And what's the difference that she wants to make at work or in the people's lives that she's leading? And have her sort of reconnect to the humanity of that.
Mm,
And because that's the inspiration for understanding what's the new playlist going to be. So we would spend some time there around that vision for her to see her own light and what she's really about in the world. What is her sacred mission in the world? To
yeah.
use that term. And then the the other side is then exploring and what's getting in the way of that. So let's look at what specific emotions is she feeling when she sees her team arguing or not getting it? What is the thing she's saying in her head about that? Like, they just don't get it. And,
Yeah.
leading a team is more trouble than it's worth. And then have her go back to, and what does that say about you? Then what is the belief you have about you in this situation? And that's where we usually get to the core belief that's driving it, which is, in her case, it might be, I'm only loved if I win and I need
Mm,
to win. I don't know, but that's where we would look. But I'd also have her see how this is not the first time this showed up in her life.
yeah.
So I'd ask questions about, okay, when you're feeling this sense of frustration, in this, where else, and you're like, they just don't get it. Where else do you say that in your life?
Mm,
Frustration and they don't get it. And where else have you said that earlier in your life? And what's the earliest memory you had where you felt like maybe you were being misunderstood or whatever that theme would be? And so she can see that it's about this deeper thread that needs to shift, not about the current circumstances that are going on, because that's where the true transformation is going to take place. Right?
yeah.
This is just the latest flavor of how it's showing up. But if you can see that actually, I think it provides a bit more motivation for why you need to do some of this deeper work, because you're going to be like, wow, yeah, if I don't fix it, it's going to show up in another form.
Yeah. A mentor just shared this with me just 2 days ago, I think. I never heard this analogy before, but he said, you know where a tsunami really comes from, right? The tsunami comes from an earthquake that happened below the surface. So everyone looks at the tsunami and all the damage that it causes and they want to interpret the tsunami. But in reality, where it really came from was the earthquake underneath. And what you're saying is be able to really get to the core of where this really came from. And I also love that when I asked you that question, it's not a test, by the way, but I asked you that question, but you answered it by saying, I would start with a question. I wouldn't give advice, which is,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
great response. It's the right response, of course. And anyone listening to, as leaders, really take Susan's example of what she just did as something that you can apply for yourself, for your team, and even in your personal life as well, which is lead with questions, lead with curiosity. And when you do, you're able to really make a difference in the people around you versus them feeling like you're just trying to impose your ideas onto them.
Yeah.
So, Susan, I want to thank you so much
There's
for,
resistance
sorry,
in that
go ahead.
anyway. I was just going to say, there's going to be inherent resistance to that anyway. You just telling, I mean, think about it. When your mother tells you you need to do X, Y, Z, how receptive are you to that? You know?
Right.
So is your team, right?
Right.
So
You immediately feel this resistance. Immediately you feel like
yeah,
your walls go up. So,
yeah,
Susan, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. This was incredible. For anyone listening, I highly encourage finding more information about Susan. Go to susandrum.com. It's susandrumm.com. And on there's a quiz you and I were talking about where
yeah.
people can identify their superpower as leaders, as well as some of the roadblocks or the potential pitfalls that could come up. And there's a lot of information that can come just by taking that quiz through your website. And of course, there is your podcast, The Enlightened Executive, which people can find directly through the website. That's susandrum.com. Susan, thank you so much for
Yeah,
being on today and sharing your insights. This was awesome.
really enjoyed it. Thank you.
What I loved about that conversation with Susan is that you can tell that she really has the experience of not only being a leader, but coaching leaders. So I'm going to do my best to synthesize our conversation down to our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight is master the internal to impact the external. Whenever you're feeling resistance, you're feeling stuck, before you go out and try to say what needs to be fixed out there, recognize what may be holding you back within. That there is a pattern that you could be going down, a limiting belief. And what is that limiting belief that's making you feel so stuck? Is there a limiting belief such as, I'm only loved if I succeed, or I'm not good enough? She went through a number of these. Recognize what that is within you, then you can have the impact on the external. Second insight, music accelerates the creation of new neural networks. I found this to be fascinating, that the studies around how Alzheimer patients react when music is playing and how music creates associations for us, and you can leverage music in an effective way. And I'll get into that into our actionable takeaways, but that's the insight. It's a powerful insight. The third insight is that I have my perspective and you have your perspective. And rather than letting that be something that creates conflict, let it be something that creates connectedness, because I know that my perspective, there's a strength there. I can see it from one angle, but I also know I have blind spots. She used like, I can't see behind my own head, right? But another person can see it. And I could have never seen it. So let me create a diverse team where I can see things from multiple angles and lean into that rather than fight with it. Our actionable takeaways. Number 1, recognize your patterns. How you do this is make this an intentional effort each day, a focus that you're going to be watching yourself, recognizing the patterns that you go down, the kind of thinking that you divert to when you're feeling resistance. Notice it. This is where your growth really begins. You have to become aware of it. So that's number 1, recognize that pattern. Number 2, create your playlist. So I went through that in the insights, but ask yourself, what do you want to feel each day? What do you want to feel when you wake up? Do you want to feel at ease? Do you want to feel excited? Do you want to feel powerful? Well, what music makes you feel that way? What music creates that kind of association? Start your day with that playlist as a means to get you into the state that you want to be in to take on the day. The third actionable takeaway, ask yourself, what is the legacy I want to leave? What is my sacred mission? Love that term. She said, what is my sacred mission? Really know what that is. Get clear on that. And then ask yourself, well, what's getting in the way of that? Let that be something that drives you and motivates you every day to be the best leader that you can be. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to walk you through a 4-step process on how to get clear on your purpose and the legacy you want to leave. We had a bit of that conversation, Susan and I, towards the end, and I thought it would be a really good thing to dive into deeper. I'm going to be providing a free resource as well. I'll include it in the show notes of the podcast episode. Normally, I reserve that for our coaching clients within our coaching program, but I thought I'd share it with you, especially as we're beginning 2025, as a means to really help you to gain clarity on the impact that you want to make and the legacy you want to leave. And a reminder, those are not released on YouTube, so that will be released on a podcast platform of your choosing. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.